I rise to speak on an important issue of national significance, Australia's engagement with India. In April last year, the then Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, announced with great enthusiasm that the former Secretary of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade and former High Commissioner to India, and now University of Queensland Chancellor, Peter Varghese AO, would be commissioned to study and prepare an India economic strategy. The opposition welcomed the idea and its chosen author. Indeed, Mr Varghese is highly respected among many in the Indian economic and trade communities. The Varghese report was released publicly in July this year. At 514 pages long, the report charts a pragmatic, ambitious and confident course for Australia's future engagement with India. It represents a truly exceptional body of research. The Turnbull government subsequently welcomed the report, and Labor has announced our support for its key recommendations. But then the government buried it. Indeed, in my questioning in Senate estimates, the government admitted that it had been sitting on the report since April this year. On Friday last week, some 7 months later, and only after continuous pressure from Labor and with the recent visit from India's President, His Excellency Ram Nath Kovind, did the Morrison government endorse the report and provide in-principle support. But we still have no substance from the government, and they still have no coherent India strategy. As many of my colleagues and stakeholders are aware, as a person of Indian origin and as an Australian senator, I am a long-time supporter of the Australia-India relationship. In 2015, I was honoured to receive the Pravasi Bharatiya Samman, the Overseas Indians Award, for building friendly relations between our two nations, which was conferred by the then President of India, His Excellency Sri Pranab Mukherjee, and it was indeed an honour. But this importance of Australia's engagement with India cannot be overstated. If we do not move quickly, Australia is at risk of losing out to other countries that have already recognised the myriad of opportunities that India brings in the coming years. Modern Australia and India share a common heritage, and as His Excellency President Kovind recently said during his visit last week to Australia, a special bond. But like Australia has shed its colonial links, developed its own culture, economy, and may soon, I hope, become a republic, India similarly bears no resemblance to what it did under the British Raj. It is an economic superpower in the making, and indeed a republic. As Mr Varghese observed, India is changing, driven by the politics of aspiration. And as His Excellency President Kovind fittingly declared last week, we are running and soon we will be galloping. So in this regard, the numbers speak for themselves. India is now the world's fastest growing large economy. It is the third largest economy in purchasing power parity terms and largest democracy in the world. By 2025, 1/5 of the world's working-age population will be Indian. In the next 10 years, India's 5 largest cities will have economies comparable to that of middle-income countries today. Within the business sector, sales and earnings growth among Indian companies are noticeably higher than their Australian counterparts. Over the past 5 years, India's stock market has seen greater performance than the ASX. Inbound foreign direct investment has increased by 19% each year over the past 20 years, and India's trade has increased from 13% to 40% of GDP. And there is considerable room for India to maintain that rapid economic ascent. Its mean age is only 27, and 90% of its workers are still engaged in the informal economy. So against that backdrop, the government of India is seeking to upskill some 400 million of its citizens, moving them from the formal economy and expanding the country's secondary and tertiary industries' prowess. And as Mr Varghese observes in his report, there is no market over the next 20 years which offers more growth opportunities for Australian business than India. As Australia's engagement in India has considerable room to grow, our Shadow Minister for Trade, Jason Clare, observed last Thursday when speaking at the AFR India Business Summit that to date Australia hasn't been hungry enough. He also rightly observed that Varghese's report is potentially as important as the one Ross Garnaut produced for Bob Hawke's government almost 30 years ago on North East Asia. But the reality is our trade with India is comparable to our trade with New Zealand, a country not even 1/100th of India's size, a quarter of the population of Delhi. But while 19,000 Australian companies export to New Zealand, only 2,000 export to India. Over the past decade, Australia's exports to China have quadrupled, but our exports to India have remained stagnant, indeed dropping by a quarter between 2010 and 2016. Indeed, Varghese's report makes the pragmatic estimate that the opportunity exists to expand our export market from $14.9 billion to as much as $45 billion over the coming decades, and for our investment in India to rise tenfold. The report emphasises that our economies are complementary. As India continues to advance towards becoming the world's most populous nation, its third largest economy, it will need more of what Australia can and has developed as a competitive advantage in providing. In this respect, the report identifies 10 core sectors, in particular education, agribusiness, resources, tourism, energy, health, financial services, infrastructure, sport, science and innovation, where Australia is well positioned to succeed. And beyond complementarity, the potential that India presents to improve our economy's security cannot be overstated. In a time of increasing uncertainty in the international trading system, we need to take steps to add balance and reduce our international trade risk. But developing a deep, sustainable economic relationship capable of producing increasing and long-term benefits for both countries will not happen if left to market forces alone. Government support is required, and the current government is nowhere to be seen. By contrast, Labor has committed to supporting the report's 10 key recommendations and more including holding annual Australia Week in India trade missions following Varghese's India economic strategy, working with the Indian government to establish a reciprocal internship program to allow recent Australian graduates to help build the Asia business capability of young Australian professionals, implementing a future Asia strategy to immerse ourselves further into the Indo-Pacific region and make Australia and the region more secure. Labor's commitments will address not just the report's economic strategy, but also the geopolitical congruence and people-to-people ties, which the report stresses must also be improved to achieve success. Australia's India diaspora now numbers near 700,000, tripling over the past decade. 1 in 50 Australians were born in India, more than any other OECD country per capita. And in my time as a senator of Indian origin, I have engaged actively with this diaspora at key Indian festivals, attending Diwali events in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, my home state, all over the country, seeing indeed the growth and the opportunity to spread multiculturalism through those festivals. I think that we need to create a more meaningful relationship that can improve social utility and mobility, create jobs and foster opportunities for people in both countries and indeed the region
to live fulfilling lives, and this report needs to be commended.